The squad car lights flashed across my old barn like the dramatic finale of a crime series instead of an ordinary Tuesday evening. Two officers crouched behind their open cruiser doors, hands hovering over their holsters, yelling through a bullhorn, "Step away from the illegal structure and put the tool down," they ordered. Inside the taped-off perimeter, beneath a glaring floodlight, I calmly tightened the last bolt on my newly installed, fully permitted grain silo. I didn't look frightened. I looked faintly irritated. On the graveled driveway, HOA President Lynette Harlow practically hummed with self-righteous fury, arms crossed, wedge sandals dug into the same dirt my great-grandfather once plowed. Her laminated HOA badge shone in the patrol lights like some cursed relic. "He's been warned," she shrilled at the sergeant. "He refused to comply with the architectural committee. This is a direct violation of our sightline covenants." The sergeant squinted at the farmhouse, the stretching pasture, the faded sign reading Crow Family Farm, established 1924. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "this is clearly a farm that used to be a farm." Lynette snapped back. "It is now part of Maple Ridge Estates, Phase 2. He doesn't get special treatment just because his ancestors were here first." I flipped a switch on my porch. Instantly, all my high-definition security cameras rotated toward the officers and the cluster of HOA members. A small red light blinked on a legal notice taped to my porch. "Post, audio and video recording in progress. By entering, you consent." Wiping my hands on a rag, I walked to the edge of my property line and spoke just loud enough. "Sergeant," I called, "before you step onto my land, you'll want to read that court order you were served this morning." The sergeant frowned, reaching into his chest-off pockets. Lynette's smile sharpened in brittle triumph until he unfolded the document and his entire expression shifted. He read it once, then again. Then he looked from me, to the cameras, to the row of HOA board members packed around his bumper, and a slow realization dawned. Hell," he muttered. "We just walked into a setup." I shrugged. "Not a setup," I said. "A trap. Legal distinction. My lawyer says that matters." 6 months earlier, I had 3 things pinned on my vision board. Reclaim my 100-year-old family farm before developers paved it into cul-de-sacs. Repair the barn's leaking roof, and be left completely, blissfully alone. I was 30 for quiet, patient, and equipped with the kind of 1,000-yard stare you earn from a decade in IT. Customer support. Listening to grown adults insist their Wi-Fi is haunted. I wore flannel without irony and preferred tractors over group chats. Crow Farm sat at the far edge of Riverside County, where cornfields were being swallowed by amenity-rich communities, with names like Fox Hollow Reserve and the cottages at Cedar Creek, none of which featured foxes, cottages, or even a ditch that resembled a creek. My grandparents had been forced to sell off most of their acreage in the late 90s to cover medical bills. The land flipped, then flipped again, until a developer carved out Maple Ridge Estates, 220 houses, ornamental trees, and an HOA with a 60-page handbook and the personality of a parking ticket. But the core homestead, the farmhouse, barn, and 10 stubborn acres barely stayed in the family. When my uncle's gambling problems threatened even that last sliver, I drained every account I had, cashed out my retirement, and bought it from him. I arrived at closing with the cashier's check and a folded black and white photo of my great-grandfather standing proudly in front of the very barn behind me now. The title rep slid the keys across the table. "Congratulations," she said. "You're the new owner of Crow Farm." Then she hesitated and added that technically, I was considered a non-participating agricultural neighbor to Maple Ridge Estates. "Non-participating sounds perfect," I said. "I'm extremely skilled at not participating." I moved in the next day. By the end of week 1, I met Lynette. She marched onto my porch without warning, perfectly highlighted white blonde bob, yoga pants, and a binder thick enough to drop a cow. "I'm Lynette Harlow," she announced, "president of Maple Ridge Estates HOA, and you are something of a pro." "Name's Daniel," I said, "and I live here." She looked me up and down, eyes lingering disapprovingly on my work boots. "Our community prides itself on cohesion and visual harmony," she lectured. "When buyers see your rustic structures, it harms perceived property values. I glanced at the barn, weathered, crooked, stubborn, and older than her entire subdivision. That's 100 years of visual harmony right there, I replied. We're willing to be reasonable, she continued. Our board has created an integration plan. You may submit all changes to your property for architectural review. In exchange, we grant you access to community amenities. I've got a field, a creek, and no neighbors breathing down my neck, I said. Pretty sure I'm good on amenities. Her cheeks flushed. Sir, you don't seem to understand how this works. Oh, I do, I said, leaning against the porch post. You're the HOA. I'm the guy who isn't in your HOA. That's how it works. Her smile tightened into something colder. We'll see, she said. HOA Karen energy is like mold if you spot a little. There's always a whole lot growing behind the wall. First came the letters, a courtesy notice, declaring that visible farm machinery was disruptive to the community aesthetic, a request for cooperation, asking me to limit tractor use between 6:00 p.m. and 9:00 a.m. so some residents could enjoy their back decks in peace. A printed sheet titled Community Dumpster Etiquette. Despite my dumpster being half a mile from their nearest postage stamp yard, each one arrived on Maple Ridge Estates letterhead and ended with a threat. Failure to comply may result in fines and legal action. I tossed them into a kitchen drawer I labeled compostable threats. Then came the spy eye, caught Lynette and 2 board members lingering on the HOA walking trail. Phones pointed toward my property like they were photographing a rare creature. When I waved, Lynette ducked behind a maple tree. A week later, an animal control officer showed up. We received a report of neglected livestock, he said, eyeing my extremely pampered, overweight chickens who were busy inhaling watermelon rinds. Neglected? I asked. The complainant stated, your animals were living in dilapidated, non-code compliant structures, the officer read from his tablet. The chickens clucked indignantly from their perfectly solid, well-maintained coop. After a full inspection, the officer shook his head. Everything looks fine, he said. Honestly, I've seen 4-H kids with worse setups. As he left, he muttered under his breath that he hated HOA weekends. Next came code enforcement. Then the fire marshal. Then, a junior planner from county zoning who couldn't have been more than 12 years old. All of them left irritated not with me, but with whoever kept filing complaints. The county notices told the story clearly. Every single report came from the same source, the HOA office, submitted by L. Harlow, presenting the interests of Maple Ridge Estates. Fine, I thought. You want to speak for the neighborhood? Let's see how far you're willing to take it. I read my deed. I read the zoning regulations. I even read, with a mix of disbelief and dark amusement, the entire Maple Ridge HOA handbook, just to understand the bizarre operating system inside their heads. Buried deep in an old county ordinance, I found something glorious. The Agricultural Heritage Preservation Act. It granted special protections to century-old family farms, including immunity from nuisance complaints filed by adjacent residential developments as long as the property could document continuous agricultural use and historical significance. Crow Farm. Establish EDIN 1924. Current year, 2024. The ink on that 100-year qualification may as well have been sprinkled with glitter. I hired a land use lawyer named Miguel A.O. bespectacled, enthusiastic, and thrilled to finally have a client who wasn't trying to pave something. You, my friend, Miguel said, are about to become every HOA's worst nightmare, legally untouchable and just petty enough. Together, we filed for official heritage farm designation. I gathered everything: old photographs, tax receipts, even a ledger my great-grandmother kept in 1937 tracking egg sales. 3 months later, the county approved it. Crow Farm, officially recognized heritage agricultural property, and just like that, the entire game board shifted, but Lynette apparently didn't get the update. 1 week after the heritage status came through, she escalated from irritating to creatively illegal. I received a certified letter not from the HOA this time, but from an entity called Maple Ridge Estates Architectural Control Committee, Incorporated, a shell corporation Lynette had registered with the state. Inside was a notice of non-conforming use, claiming my barn violated pre-existing subdivision sightline agreements. They insisted that when the developer built Maple Ridge, they had recorded an aesthetic easement across Crow Farm supposedly restricting future structures, and granting the HOA oversight authority. Attached was a copy of a suspicious document allegedly signed by my grandfather 30 years ago. The signature looked wrong, too smooth, too slanted, nothing like his shaky, arthritic handwriting. I drove straight to the recorder's office. The clerk searched the county system. Nothing. No easement. No record. No filing. The document Lynette mailed me was, in legal terms, a fancy piece of fiction scribbled on paper. Miguel practically cackled when I emailed him. They forged an easement, he said. They are manufacturing authority over your land that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, Lynette launched a neighborhood PR campaign. At block parties, in Facebook groups, at backyard gossip huddles, she spun an entire mythology. I was illegally expanding industrial operations. My barn was a dangerous collapsing structure threatening Maple Ridge property lines. My future silo still just blueprints pinned to my kitchen. Corkboard was allegedly unpermitted construction. She was actively coordinating law enforcement to shut down. A few nervous residents began emailing the sheriff directly. Sensing momentum, Lynette went all in. She filed a formal complaint with the sheriff's office, accusing me of obstructing community safety officers, threatening HOA board members, and constructing non-compliant structures in violation of subdivision rules. She attached the forged easement. She attached self-written incident reports printed on Theo letterhead. She even claimed I had brandished a tool in a threatening manner during a supposed confrontation near the walking trail. When 2 deputies arrived to talk, I was prepared. Every inch of my property line now had signs. You are now entering heritage agricultural property. Area under audio and video recording. I wore a body cam. My security cameras captured everything. The conversation with the deputies was calm, uneventful, and absolutely destructive to Lynette's fabricated narrative. They left with a copy of my heritage designation, Miguel's business card, and a polite, firm understanding that HOA authority ended at their neighborhood fence. But the complaint still existed in the system. Miguel leaned back in his chair. Here's the problem, he said. Submitting false reports to law enforcement is a crime. Using forged documents to support those reports? Even worse. And she's doing it while acting in an official capacity as HOA president. Can we nail her for it? I asked. Miguel smiled slowly. We can do better. We can document it. Then we let internal affairs and the state attorney general handle the hammering. Thus, the trap was born. I applied for a permit to install a new grain silo and reinforce the old barn completely by the book. The county approved everything. Stamped. Signed. Fees paid. Miguel quietly forwarded copies of every legitimate permit to the sheriff's office and the county attorney with a simple note. If anyone tells you these structures are illegal, they are lying. Please route all HOA complaints to this address so we can track them for an ongoing investigation. Then I waited. It took Lynette 11 days. On the night of the raid, I was halfway through bolting the silo braces when I saw the unmistakable glow of HOA-branded flashlights bouncing down my driveway. Behind them rolled a county cruiser, lights off, engine running. Lynette marched at the front, flanked by her board members, her voice already raised before the cruiser even stopped. Officers, she called. Over here. He's in the act right now. This is exactly what I described in my complaint. Unauthorized construction. We need to shut this down before someone gets hurt. The sergeant stepped out, looking exhausted but cautious. He'd been briefed. He knew about the heritage designation, the permits, and Miguel's email trail. Evening, ma'am, he said. Evening, Mr. Crow. I nodded. Evening, Sergeant. Lynette thrust a folder at him. Here's the easement, she declared. This proves we have authority over changes to the property. He's been defiant, aggressive. Ma'am, the sergeant cut in. We've already. Before he could finish, Lynette strode past him and ducked under the yellow contractor tape, her heels crunching angrily across the gravel. "This area is dangerous," she announced loudly. "I'm ordering a stop work." "Ma'am," the sergeant barked. "Step back behind the tape. Don't you raise your voice at me," she snapped. "I am the legal representative of Maple Ridge Estates. You're here because I requested your presence." The second deputy, much younger and clearly regretting his career path, glanced toward my porch. Multiple cameras were pointed directly at them. The blinking recording in progress notice glowed red. Next to it, taped neatly to a post, was a large envelope to responding officers' permits and court order. "Open before entry, Sarge," the deputy murmured, tugging the sergeant's sleeve. "We were supposed to read that first." They opened it. Inside were copies of my permits, my heritage designation, Miguel's letter, and a brand new court order signed that very morning. The order, issued by a tired judge who was clearly done with HOA nonsense, stated, "Law enforcement may not interfere with permitted work on Crow Farm without clear evidence of immediate danger. Any complaints referencing alleged HOA easements are to be treated as disputed until investigations conclude. All interactions on the property must be recorded and preserved due to an ongoing inquiry into potential false reports." The sergeant's face went pale. "Mrs. Harlow," he said carefully, "did you read this?" She waved her hand dismissively. "I'm not here to litigate. You have your paperwork. I have mine." She whipped out her forged easement like she was unsheathing a mythical sword. "This supersedes whatever farm vanity certificate he has," she declared. "You need to arrest him for ignoring lawful HOA directives." The sergeant stared at her for a long moment, before speaking quietly into his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Can you confirm if Internal Affairs and the county attorney are monitoring this call? Per memo C-27. The radio crackled. "Affirmative. They're on the line." I almost felt bad. Almost. Miguel had warned the sheriff's office that tonight would probably explode. The sheriff, determined not to get sucked into an HOA meltdown, had agreed to loop in Internal Affairs and the county attorney live. That way no one could later claim confusion. "Mrs. Harlow," the sergeant said louder now, "I've been instructed to ask you a specific question." She shifted, suddenly less certain. "And what question is that?" she asked. "Are you, in your capacity as HOA president, asserting to law enforcement that you have a legally recorded easement granting you control over structures on this property?" "Yes," she said, chin lifting stubbornly. "Of course. That's exactly what I've been saying this entire time. And are you aware," he continued, "that the county recorder's office has confirmed no such easement exists?" Her mouth opened, then closed. It must be an administrative error," she stammered. "The developer promised, so this document you're holding," he pressed. "You are presenting it as official, knowing it is not recorded, and knowing the supposed signing party disputes its authenticity? Are you interrogating me?" she snapped. "I called you here to deal with him." Over the radio, someone cleared their throat. "Unit 12, County Attorney here. Please advise Mrs. Harlow that she is dangerously close to admitting to filing a knowingly false instrument and submitting fraudulent reports to law enforcement." The sergeant winced. "You heard the attorney, ma'am." The shift in the crowd was instant. Neighbors gathered along the walking trail leaned closer. Board members subtly edged away from Lynette as though she had just sprouted horns. "Mrs. Harlow," the sergeant said, "at this time going to ask you to step out of the work zone and remain here. You are not under arrest, but this interaction is part of an ongoing criminal investigation." "What?" she gasped. "He's the criminal. He's the one breaking rules." "Ma'am," he said, gesturing to the permits, the heritage plaque, the recording signs. "His rules are backed by state law. Yours appear to be backed by stationery." The fallout hit like a summer storm. Within a week, Internal Affairs opened a formal case into repeated false calls originating from the HOA. The county attorney referred the forged easement and falsified reports to the state attorney general. The local paper ran a front-page headline, "Heritage farm owner says HOA tried to annex his land." Sub-headline, "State investigating forgery claims." Lynette scrambled to save face. She claimed the developer misled her. She claimed the forgery was an administrative mistake. She claimed she never intended for officers to treat me like a criminal, but the recordings and her own written complaints told another story. She had repeatedly asserted legal authority. She didn't have pressured officers to trespass on protected land, lied about me threatening her, and used her HOA title to bolster those leases. The state ultimately charged her with filing a false report, attempting to file a forged instrument harassment. There were no dramatic handcuffs. This wasn't television, but she did have to turn herself in, pose for a very unflattering mugshot, and sit through an array agent as 3 reporters scribbled quotes. As part of her plea deal, Lynette was fined $12,000, sentenced to 120 hours of community service, and banned from serving on any HOA or neighborhood board in the state for 10 years. When the judge read the sentence, Lynette's face went from crimson to ghost white. $12,000? She whispered, her voice cracking. For trying to protect property values? The judge peered at her over his glasses. No, ma'am, he said. For harassment, filing false reports, and wasting law enforcement resources with forged documents. There is a difference. Lynette sank into her chair, hands trembling, staring at the legal paperwork as though it were written in a language she'd never seen before.